I think we take our humanness too much for granted. I don't think we realize how nasty, brutish, and short most of life has been over the centuries, and how really only within the confines of the 20th century has a level of comfort and food availability and shelter and basic creature needs been met to the point where most people can begin to lead the philosophical life that previously was the privilege of emperors, kings, great courts. Now we all indulge ourselves. We all have the philosopher king's point of view. We all have a model of history, a model of the future, and we all feel capable of stepping into the shoes of our leaders and discharging that responsibility. Well, in order to do that, I think we need to overcome our amnesia about how we got to this place. I don't see, you see, what science would have you believe and explicitly implies is that we are an aberration. Over here you have nature, the beautiful rainforests, the wonderful coral reefs, the symmetry of the hummingbird, the sea urchin, and the butterfly. And here you have us, grimy, tawdry, polluting, ugly, driven, in disequilibrium, in denial. I don't believe that. I believe that this kind of thinking that breaks humanity away from the rest of nature is the first of the great disempowering myths by which the Western mind has enslaved itself. And we are not outside of nature. We are not a runaway toxic process. We are not a mutation. We are, in fact, that part of nature which has been deputized for a purpose. We are the energy gathering aspect of the Gaian mind. We are the language forming capacity of nature herself. You may know the concept of a catalyst in chemistry. A catalyst is something which, when you stir it into a chemical reaction, the reaction proceeds more quickly, but the catalyst itself is not destroyed. And this is what I think we are. We are a strategy on the part of the Gaian mind to produce an effect that would otherwise take much, much longer to produce. The main effect of the presence of human life on this planet has been to vastly accelerate the speed at which nature is able to creatively express herself.
I'm real curious about one thing. Why is it important for you to do this?
I wonder myself. You mean, am I the alien ambassador, whether I like it or not? Well, I often, when asked this question, I've said, it beats honest work. I mean, my brother is a PhD in 3 subjects and works in hard science, and I don't think it's brought him immense happiness, not that he's despondent, but I was always kind of a slider, and certainly when I reached La Chirera in 1971, I had a price on my head by the FBI. I was running out of money. I was at the end of my rope. And then they recruited me and said, you know, with a mouth like yours, there's a place for you in our organization. And, you know, I've worked in deep background positions about which the less said, the better. And then, you know, about 15 years ago, they shifted me into public relations, and I've been there to the present. I think ideas get me high, and I like the feeling of understanding, and I love diversity to the point of weirdness. I think of myself as a pretty savvy person, and not easily led into false dogma. And yet, this is such a strange idea. And so it's basically a plea for help. It's not a cult. It's not that I want you to join me in believing in this. It's that this is so outlandish that join me as a scientist would join a research team, and let's cut it to pieces and show that it was simply a misunderstanding of information theory coupled with bad mathematics spliced onto a weak ontology or something like that, you know. Because this idea, I could live with the time wave if I only had to read about it in Time magazine and that it was being developed by Negroponte and Prigozhin. The thing that sets up the cognitive dissonance for me is that I, from the point of view of most people, thought it up. And I am so aware of my limitations that to me that's the strongest argument there is, that it's malarkey, you know. And then I read books like Thomas Kuhn's The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, and it says, you know, this is how it happens. Some guy, marginal, not at the center of the field, and somewhat at loose ends, but usually with a broad education, gets it, you know. I have spent a lot of time educating myself about what it would mean if this were true. In other words, how big a revolution is it? And it's an enormous revolution. The implications are staggering. For example, if it's true that time is a fluctuating variable, as this so strongly argues, then science as practiced for the past 500 years is out the window, because that kind of science is based on the concept of experiment. And experiment has built into it the concept of what's called a restoration of initial conditions. That means you can go back to the start and run the experiment again. This is saying, as Heraclitus said, you never step into the same river twice. And consequently, the idea of repetitive experiment is shown to be intellectually bankrupt. We could almost say of science that it is the study of those phenomena so crude that the time in which they occur does not affect them. And so falling balls, you know, gas diffusion, simple things, it doesn't matter where in time they occur. But things like the building of an empire, the waging of a war, the evolution of a species, the conquest of a biome by a new set of genes, these things, timing is everything and dictates success or failure.